Hello and welcome back to the Consistory of the Kyle YouTube channel. I'm your host for this video, Reverend Zabel of St. Evangelical Lutheran Church, located in Dalby, Queensland, Australia. In this video, I'm doing another video in my Jewish Apologetics series where we look at the Old Testament scriptures to show that the teachings of the Christian church is not something invented just in the New Testament with Christianity, but existed already in the Old Testament and was believed by the Old Testament believers like Abraham, Moses, and David. And today I want to look at the fact that the Messiah was not going to be a warrior king. So you see this in the New Testament where the Pharisees and even the apostles, they all had this idea that the Jewish Messiah was going to be this great warrior king that was going to conquer the Roman Empire and set up this global Jewish empire. And even today, the rabbinic Jews are waiting for the Messiah to be like this warrior king that will set up some Jewish empire or some Jewish nation state. But that's not the teaching of Scripture. And there are particularly two places that I want to look at that show that this isn't the teachings of the Old Testament. The first and the most famous is the suffering servant of Isaiah. Throughout the prophet of Isaiah, he talks about this suffering servant. And even the Jews of the New Testament period, like the Pharisees and that, they believed that this suffering servant of Isaiah was the Messiah. And so we've got to ask ourselves, how can the Messiah be a warrior king and the suffering servant? How can he both suffer and bear in his flesh the iniquity of us all and die for his people, and yet at the same time be this warrior king that conquers the Romans and sets up a Jewish empire? He can't be. And so we see already in the Old Testament that the Messiah is not going to be this warrior king. Now, the other text I want to bring up is the first chapter of the prophet Hosea. And in that, God is talking about the restoration of Israel and Judah. See, God is first warning that he's going to bring this destruction upon Israel and Judah. That in the valley of Jezreel, God is going to break the bow of Israel. That God is going to bring this punishment upon his people. And yet, God also gives them the promise that they will be restored. That God's kingdom will be restored. God's people will be restored. And yet, God says, I will not save you through sword, through bow, through horse, or through war horse. I'm not going to save you through warfare. I will save you by my name. I will save you by myself. God says it is not a warrior king that is going to save you. It is me, God, who's going to save you. And as we already touched on in a previous video, the Jews believed that the Messiah would be a suffering servant, and yet also in the prophet Zechariah, God says that he is the one who's going to be pierced. God gave the promise in the Old Testament that he would save his people not through warfare, but through the death of the Messiah. And not just through the death of the Messiah, but through the death of God. God says, I will save you. I am the one who will be pierced. The suffering servant is God incarnate in human flesh. And so, again, this is not some new teaching invented by the apostles in the New Testament. This is something taught already in the Old Testament. That God would save his people not through a warrior king, but through a suffering servant who would be God himself in human flesh. I've been your host, Reverend Zabel. Goodbye and God bless.